Did you know that early American light tanks were armored so lightly that their best defense wasn't steel, but speed and luck? Watch until the end to see how US light tanks evolved from cramped steel boxes with 37mm pop guns into fast scouts with real firepower, and which model crews considered the first modern light tank. M2A1 light tank. This pre-war light tank is one of the first serious US attempts at a modern tracked fighting vehicle, even if it still looks more 1930s than World War II. Weighing around 11 tons with roughly 16 to 25 millimeters of armor at best, it is built to stop rifle fire and shell fragments, not dedicated anti-tank guns. The main armament is a 37mm cannon in a small turret, backed by multiple machine guns in the hull and superstructure, reflecting an interwar belief that mowing down infantry was more important than dueling other tanks. A gasoline engine pushes it to about 55 to 60 km per hour on roads, giving it impressive paper mobility, but its suspension and ergonomics are still crude. In service, it mainly trains crews in driving, gunnery, and radio use, providing the US with a crucial stepping stone, a vehicle that shows what works, what breaks, and what absolutely must change before real war arrives. M2A2 light tank takes a strange turn. Instead of one main turret, it uses two small turrets side by side, each usually armed with a machine gun. Armor thickness remains in the 13 to 25 mm range, still firmly in the bullet-resistant category rather than truly shell-resistant. Weight drops slightly into the 8 to 9 ton range, helping mobility and keeping road speed high, but the firepower is scattered, good for spraying infantry, useless against armor. Coordination between the two turret gunners is awkward, and the commander now has even more trouble maintaining situational awareness and control. Mechanically, however, it continues to refine engines, transmissions, and suspension components that will matter later. In hindsight, this twin-turret design is a dead end, but a useful one. It proves that splitting firepower across multiple tiny weapons creates more problems than it solves, strengthening the case for a single, properly armed turret on future light tanks. M2A3 light tank cleans up some of the excesses of its predecessors and nudges the design towards something more rational. The hull is reworked, suspension improved, and internal layout revised to make better use of limited space, but armor still stays at roughly 13 to 25 mm and weight in a similar light category. The focus shifts toward making the crew's jobs easier, more logical placement of ammunition, radios, and controls, better access to mechanical components, and smoother ride characteristics over uneven ground. The main armament remains modest, with a 37mm gun still being the intended tank-killing solution even as foreign designs begin to grow more heavily armored. In training units, this machine demonstrates that the basic formula of a fast, 37mm armed light tank is workable, but also highlights that spacing, crew visibility, and communications are just as vital as raw stats. By the time full war breaks out, it is already clear that the next step must be more than a tweak. It must be a combat-ready evolution. The M2A4 is where the light tank line finally becomes something that can credibly go to war, at least in the early Pacific. Armor is increased on key surfaces up to roughly 25 mm, giving slightly better protection against heavy machine guns and light anti-tank weapons, while weight settles around 11 tons. The 37mm gun moves into a single, fully rotating turret with a coaxial machine gun, at last giving the commander and gunner a focused, easy-to-control main weapon instead of scattered machine gun nests. A reliable gasoline engine still allows road speeds in the 55 to 60 km per hour range, and its compact size makes it handy in jungle and island terrain. A small number of these tanks see combat with the US Marines, where they prove useful against lightly defended positions and older enemy armor but show their vulnerability against dedicated anti-tank guns. This model marks the true transition from experimental light tanks to genuine frontline vehicles, closing the book on the interwar series and opening the chapter that leads straight into the Stuart family. The M3 Stuart is the first US light tank to fight World War II on a large scale and becomes the fast, energetic face of American armor in early campaigns. weighing about 12 to 13 tons with frontal armor in the 25 to 40 mm range. It offers a noticeable protection boost over the M2A4 while remaining firmly in the light category. The main armament is still a 37 mm gun, but now paired with a more refined turret, better optics, and a crew layout that supports faster engagement and better communication. A radial gasoline engine propels it to around 55 to 60 km per hour on roads, with good cross-country agility, an asset in the wide deserts of North Africa and the rough terrain of early Pacific battles. In North Africa, it works as a reconnaissance and exploitation vehicle, harassing enemy positions and exploiting breakthroughs, but struggles in direct fights against newer, tougher German tanks. By mid-war, its gun is clearly underpowered for tank versus tank duels, yet as a reliable, fast scout with a decent punch against soft targets, it remains invaluable. M3A1 Stuart. The M3A1 refines the original Stuart concept rather than rewriting it. Weight and armor stay broadly similar, around 12 to 13 tons and 25 to 40 mm of protection, but the turret is reworked to include a true commander's cupola, better hatches, and improved vision blocks. Many versions drop the separate hull machine gunner position, rearranging internal space for more practical ammunition storage and radio equipment, a change that both improves survivability and crew efficiency. The 37 mm gun remains the primary armament, increasingly marginal against enemy tanks but still effective against trucks, gun positions, and older armored vehicles. Mobility continues to be a strong point, with the same fast road speed and nimble handling, making it ideal for reconnaissance, screening, and liaison roles. For crews, this variant feels less cramped and more controllable. For commanders, it's a familiar platform that fits neatly into established tactics, even as the heavy lifting against enemy armor shifts to mediums and specialized tank destroyers. M5 Stuart. With the M5, the Stuart family gets a major mechanical overhaul while keeping its basic battlefield role. Combat weight increases to roughly 14 to 15 tons, and armor thickness remains in the 25 to 45 mm zone, with some improved shaping and slopes that modestly enhance real-world protection. The big change is in the engine bay. Twin Cadillac V8 engines with an automatic transmission replace the radial, making the tank smoother to drive and easier to maintain using automotive-type components. Externally, the hull is revised with a higher engine deck and more angular lines, but the core silhouette remains recognizably Stuart-like. The 37 mm gun is still the main armament, which by now is clearly behind the curve against improved Axis armor, yet it remains adequate for reconnaissance work and for dealing with soft or lightly armored targets. Road speed stays high, around 55 to 60 km per hour, and the vehicle's agility keeps it relevant as a fast scout and screen, even as it becomes increasingly dangerous to misuse it as a frontline brawler. M22 Locust. The M22 is a radical departure, a tank built not for road marches, but for the sky. Designed as an airborne light tank, it weighs only about 7.5 to 8 tons, with thin armor in the 13 to 25 mm range and a small 37 mm gun as its primary armament. The low weight allows it to be carried by heavy gliders or specialized aircraft, giving airborne troops a chance at armored support soon after landing. On the ground, it offers modest mobility and firepower, enough to tackle machine gun nests, light vehicles, and older tanks, but it is far too fragile to stand in a prolonged fight against serious anti-tank defenses. Production numbers and combat deployment are limited, most famously in Operation Varsity, but the concept is a glimpse into future thinking about airmobile armor. As part of the US light tank story, it is a specialized offshoot rather than a main branch, yet it demonstrates just how far designers are willing to push engineering to solve unique tactical problems. M24 Chaffee. The Chaffee is the point where US light tanks stop feeling like baby mediums with weak guns, and start feeling like truly modern scouts. At around 18 tons, it is heavier than the Stuart family, but torsion bar suspension and a well-designed hull keep mobility excellent, with road speeds still around 55 to 60 km per hour and very good cross-country behavior. The major leap is the main armament, A compact 75mm gun replaces the old 37mm, dramatically increasing the ability to deal with infantry positions, light armor, and even the flanks of some heavier vehicles. Armor is still light compared to mediums, but better shaped and arranged to resist common threats without sacrificing speed. Inside, crew ergonomics, optics, and radios show the benefit of years of combat experience, giving the commander and gunner a far better fighting environment than in earlier lights. Arriving late in the war, it nonetheless sets the template for post-war light tanks: fast, well-armed for its weight, and optimized for reconnaissance and support rather than direct duels with heavy armor. Did you know the first U.S. heavy tank of World War II was so big and awkward that it never fired a shot in anger, while its late-war successor became the blueprint for the American Cold War tank? Watch until the end to see how U.S. mediums evolved from clumsy multi-gun boxes into the refined Sherman family, and which variant crews quietly considered the best all-rounder. M2 Medium. This pre-war medium is the missing link between interwar theory and real World War II fighting. Weighing around 18 to 19 tons, with roughly 25 to 32 millimeters of armor on the front, it looks more like an overgrown light tank than a serious battle machine. Armament is a 37mm main gun in a turret surrounded by multiple hull and sponson-mounted machine guns, a throwback to World War I ideas about sweeping infantry with overlapping fire. A gasoline engine pushes it to about 40 km/h on roads, but the tall silhouette and thin armor would make it a liability against any modern anti-tank gun. In practice, it serves mainly as a training and development platform, teaching U.S. crews how to work in larger tanks and giving designers a hard lesson. One good gun and better armor matter far more than a forest of machine guns. Its direct combat role is minimal, but its influence on what comes after is significant. M3 Medium. The M3 Medium is a true transitional tank, ugly, tall, and compromised, yet crucial in buying time. Combat weight is roughly 27 to 28 tons, with frontal armor in the 38 to 51 mm range depending on applique plates and variant. The key feature is the 75 mm gun mounted in the right hull sponson, giving U.S. forces a much-needed weapon capable of firing strong, high-explosive shells at anti-tank guns and bunkers. On top sits a small turret with a 37 mm gun, adding a second layer of firepower but also increasing height and complexity. American, Lee, versions use one turret design. British, Grant, versions use a lower, better-shaped turret that slightly reduces the silhouette and improves internal space. With road speeds around 38 to 40 km/h and decent desert mobility, this tank plays a vital part in North Africa, where its 75 mm solves problems earlier light and medium tanks simply cannot. It is quickly overshadowed by the Sherman, but without it, early Allied offensives would have lacked a workable medium tank with the proper main gun. M4 Sherman. The M4 family is where American medium tank design finally hits a long-lasting sweet spot. Core numbers are similar across the main variants, around 30 tons of weight, about 51 mm of frontal hull armor on early models, and a versatile 75 mm gun as standard armament. That 75 mm is not the best tank killer of the war, but it balances good heat performance for infantry support with enough penetration to handle many mid-war enemy tanks from the flank or at closer ranges. Road speeds typically fall between 38 and 48 km/h depending on engine and transmission, and mechanical reliability becomes a defining strength. These tanks start reliably, run for long distances, and are relatively easy to keep in action. The real genius is in the chassis and layout, roomy enough for upgrades, standardized enough for mass production, and flexible enough to spawn countless variants. The individual letter number combinations, M4, M4A1, A2, A3, A4, A6, mostly reflect different hull and engine choices built on this shared foundation. M4A4. The M4A4 is instantly recognizable by its slightly stretched hull, needed to house the complex Chrysler A57 multibank engine, essentially 5 car engines combined into a single power unit. This gives adequate power for the roughly 30-ton tank and keeps road speeds in the same general range as other Shermans, but at the cost of mechanical complexity, and a longer engine bay. Armor thickness and layout are broadly similar to other early welded hull variants, with about 51mm on the front and scope for applique or casting upgrades. Most of these tanks are supplied to allies, particularly the British Commonwealth, where they often become the basis for the famous Firefly conversions with the 17-pounder gun. For US forces, the engine's complexity makes it less desirable compared to simpler power plants, but as a chassis it proves robust, versatile, and capable of accepting major firepower upgrades in Allied hands. M6 Heavy Tank. The M6 Heavy represents an early US attempt to build a truly massive, heavily armored tank, but it arrives too late and too flawed to see combat. Weighing around 57 to 60 tons with frontal armor in the roughly 83 to 101mm range, it is much better protected than mediums, at least on paper. Armament is a combination of a 76mm main gun and a coaxial 37mm gun in the same turret, alongside multiple machine guns, a complex arrangement that already feels outdated compared to simpler single-gun heavy tanks elsewhere. A powerful engine pushes it to about 35 km/h on roads, but mechanical complexity, height, and logistical demands make it an unattractive proposition for mass deployment. As US doctrine shifts toward more practical, medium-centered forces and later toward a simpler heavy-medium concept, this machine quietly fades away. Its value ends up being mostly developmental, proof that sheer size and multi-gun turrets are not the direction American armor will ultimately take. M26 Pershing. The M26 marks the end of the World War II US medium/heavy evolution and the start of something that looks very much like the modern main battle tank. At roughly 41 to 42 tons with thick, well-sloped frontal armor giving effective protection in the 100mm class, it is built to survive hits from high-velocity guns that shred earlier Shermans. Its 90mm gun offers serious armor-piercing capability against Panthers and Tigers and fires heavy He shells effective against bunkers, buildings, and entrenched infantry. A new powertrain and suspension give road speeds in the 30 to 35 km/h range, slower than lighter mediums, but acceptable for a spearhead vehicle intended to lead assaults and withstand counter-fire. Internal layout gives the crew better ergonomics, optics, and ammunition stowage than earlier US tanks, reflecting lessons learned in years of combat. Arriving late and in limited numbers, it does not reshape the entire European campaign, but where it appears, it proves that American industry can field a tank fully competitive with late-war German designs and ready for the armored doctrine of the post-war world. Thanks for watching this video and spending your time diving into World War II armor with us. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells the algorithm to show this to more history fans. And if you want more videos on tanks, small arms, and battlefield loadouts, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episodes.